The world's global temperature plummets by 100 degrees Celsius and the Earth enters into an ice age era. Over a staggering 85% of the world's population die frozen. And after weeks of freezing, the world experiences a shutdown of all its infrastructure overnight. The protagonist of this story, Han Feng, is the only one able to sit at home with water and electricity, enjoying a glass of premium wine by the boiler. Neighbors in the homeowner housing complex residents chat group began to complain. In this extreme cold, people are sure to freeze to death. And even if they don't freeze, they'll starve. But Han Feng has stockpiled enough supplies to last him 10 lifetimes before the apocalypse arrived. And this was all possible because Han Feng died and had been reborn 17 days before the apocalypse. At this moment, a reporter on the news warns everyone to stay inside as the temperature continued to drop with no signs of stopping. But everyone shouldn't give up hope because the government hasn't forgotten about them. As long as they unite and stand together, they will overcome this crisis. This news was cut off mid-speech as a plane freezes in mid-air and crashes right into the unfortunate reporter, killing him instantly. And the entire ordeal was broadcast on any television still working. Meanwhile, inside a building stocked with rations and almost frozen foods, someone with silent footsteps was creeping around with a bloody iron bat. The person was the tenant of the apartment, Han Feng. Suddenly, a female voice calls his name from outside his apartment. So as Han Feng peeps through the hole in his door, he was surprised to see his school friend and crush, Lee Hyona, a young blonde baddie with a 38D melons and crazy curves that could render any man into having salacious thoughts. And her current victim was Han Feng. Hyona was shivering in the cold, tears in her eyes, knocking on Han Feng's door. Han Feng, blushing profusely, immediately opens his door. It's already deadly cold, so as Han Feng asks what Hyona was doing at his place, he also tells her to come inside, reminding her that it was dangerous and freezing outside. However, upon entering midway, Hyona suddenly grabbed the door and kissed Han Feng on the mouth. Han Feng was in a daze, and before he could understand what was going on, Hyona started playing with her tongue, then continued to suck Han Feng dry with her mouth. This continued for quite a few minutes. However, as soon as the deed was done, a bewildered Han Feng, wiping his drool from his mouth, questioned what's gotten into Hyona. She kissed him the second he opened the door. Hyona, with a seductive tone, whispered that she realized Han Feng was the only one she loved all along, and that act just now was the declaration of her love. You're the only one I'm supposed to be with. And as the saying goes, it takes a near-death experience like this crisis to see a person's true colors, to see who they really are. Someone who would be there for you no matter what. Hyona said this in a hopeful and seductive voice, rendering Han Feng speechless at those words. He couldn't believe his goddess was finally noticing him as more than just a loser. He was so shocked that he just stood there, frozen on the spot and not responding. Seeing this, Hyona gently grabbed Han Feng's hand and placed it on her 38D bouncy melons, then whispered in Han Feng's ear, telling him that if he didn't believe her, he should feel her heartbeat. Also, she continued that she was willing to do anything. And I mean anything that Han Feng wanted. Anything? This sudden revelation shook Han Feng's world. His heart was beating faster than his brain could comprehend what was happening. Is this really happening, or is it all a dream? As Han Feng was lost in his thoughts, Hyona decided to make the first move herself. So with her hand seductively placed on Han Feng's ass, her leg was also placed in between his legs as well. Hyona then started to slowly rub Han Feng's hot iron rod, over and over again. At that moment, Han Feng started to vibrate like an old tractor's engine. His heart felt like it was about to explode at any given second. He finally replied that Hyona had no idea how much her words meant to him. And as he tried to continue, Hyona gently grabbed his face, whispering and insisting he needn't say anything. She knows and understands his true feelings for her. And now, Han Feng knows hers as well. She requested Han Feng to close his eyes because she had a gift for him. As soon as Han Feng did, someone grabbed the door, and with all the might the person could muster, he smashed Han Feng's head. Blood splattered everywhere. And as blood continued to gush out from Han Feng's head, Hyona and her real boyfriend checked out the supplies Han Feng had in his apartment. Meanwhile, Han Feng, lying on the deadly cold floor, started to go numb. He was unable to move his arms, his entire body, and slowly his vision became blurry. He couldn't believe this was the gift Hyona was referring to. I mean, how the fuck is this a gift? And to make matters even worse, Hyona and her boyfriend decided to get all nasty right in front of him. This was the reward Hyona was going to receive for her Oscar-worthy performance earlier. Her boyfriend said. Han Feng couldn't believe what he was seeing. To him, they were like devils. Han Feng swore that if there was a next life, He will never be a bootlicker again. Then, suddenly, something strange happened. Through the darkness, Han Feng saw a flicker of light ahead of him, and somehow he was being pulled towards it. As he got closer, the light began to shine brighter and brighter. Han Feng felt its warmth too. He extended his hand, reaching for it. He thought it was the path which will lead him to heaven. However, as soon as Han Feng touched the light, it turned red, and suddenly, Han Feng's entire soul started to burn. Then, his soul started shredding into pieces, his screams echoing the silent abyss. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, Han Feng woke up, covered in sweat and completely exhausted. The first thing Han Feng saw and immediately felt was the warm sunlight coming through the window. Huh? Where am I? Han Feng was in a state of confusion as he continued to stare outside through his apartment window, and just like that, 30 minutes passed by like a bullet. Han Feng stood up, went to his balcony, and once again, he continued to bask in the warmth of the sun. He never thought in a million years that he would ever feel this warmth again. Han Feng had checked the date. It was June 28th, and based on his memory from his previous life, the apocalypse onset was on July 15th, 17 days from now. And although he was supposed to be dead, for some mysterious reason, he came back in time, just enough time before the apocalypse. This also meant he'd been reborn. His desperate wish was granted in his final moments. But enough about that, he thought. There was something strange happening with Han Feng's body, specifically his hand. Ever since he woke up, his right hand was continuously glowing red, and he had no clue what it was or how to make it stop. According to Han Feng, it also didn't hurt or anything. It just felt a little bit warm, and as it doesn't seem to do anything, Han Feng thought he was imagining things at the beginning. But then, in the middle of his thoughts, a heavy sneeze came out of him. When he opened his eyes, his red, glowing hand had changed to green. Huh? What's going on? In addition, the green glow became bigger and bigger, freaking the shit out of him. Wasn't it troublesome enough that his right hand started glowing red? But now it was green. Seriously, what the actual fuck is going on? Han Feng became frustrated and confused with the beams of light shooting out of his hand. He wondered how science could justify his glowing color-changing right hand. Soon after, the green glow shrunk in size, and it seemed like Han Feng could change the intensity of the green glow with his will, something he couldn't do with the red glow. But after a few minutes of failing to snuff out his glowing right hand, another serious issue came up. He immediately sat on his sofa as his legs gave out. Han Feng started feeling like all his energy was leaving his body. He felt completely drained. Wait, is this because of the green light? Growing more and more frustrated, Han Feng shook his hand violently, trying to stop it from glowing. Damn it! What the hell is this thing? But suddenly his eyes widened when a thought came to his mind. Hang on a sec. What if I got a superpower? You know, like a cheat skill in manhwas that the protagonist of the story always seems to get. Well, no shit, my friend. With this newfound theory, Han Feng grabbed a kitchen knife, thinking if he held a weapon, some reaction might happen. But nothing happened. Oh, come on. Seriously, but wait. Something did happen as his stomach started to growl, making him feel like he would pass out any moment if he didn't eat something. Feeling defeated, he went to his fridge, and as he opened it to find something to eat, he realized that the entire fridge was empty. This was bad. If I don't eat something soon, I'm gonna pass out and probably die out of hunger. But at that very moment, Han Feng noticed a jar full of roasted soybeans. He remembered that it was a leftover snacks he had from before the apocalypse. And although it wasn't exactly a full meal, he was desperate. I mean, what else could he do? He decided to eat it first, and then go to the supermarket later. Han Feng slowly grabbed a soybean and tossed it into his mouth immediately after. A loud boom happened a second after. It was the soybean which had exploded in Han Feng's face, making the area all seem like a scene from a comic book. As the smoke cleared, there was fresh soybean plant in Han Feng's mouth. Confused, he pulled the mysterious plant out of his mouth and noticed it was a fresh plant of a soybean. Also, he wasn't feeling tired or drained anymore. And the green light was gone too. Did it have something to do with the soybeans? Now Han Feng was really confused. He plucked one soybean from the plant in his hand, and upon opening it, he was utterly stunned to see fresh soybeans inside. Ah, so this is my power. What an incredible discovery. I need to study it some more, but right now I have bigger fish to fry. I need to stock up on supplies before the world ends. Outside, the weather was very moderate as birds were chirping non-stop, and the buzzing crowd was evident to see. Soon all this will be ancient history, Han Feng thought. He was in the crowd, thinking about everything that had transpired. Okay, so let me get this straight. First, there was a red glow around my hand. Then it turned green. Then the green glow shrinks and grows, making my heartbeat faster and feel super tired. Then, the soybean I touched with my glowing green hand became a bean sprouts. What kind of power is this? After his recount, Han Feng was still confused and growing frustrated again. In the middle of his thoughts, an angelic voice called his name from behind. So as Han Feng stopped and turned back, well, it was none other than Miss 38D Melons, Lee Hyona. She was wearing a beautiful dress and looking absolutely gorgeous. Once again, with a seductive voice, she said, "What a coincidence to meet like this. It's like the heavens are trying to bring us closer." Heavens? Yeah, right? Han Feng looked like he'd seen a ghost. After the incident, it seems Han Feng was now seeing her under a different lens. Lee Hyona, the goddess of his dreams for 3 long years. Han Feng had done everything to make her happy, even though he knew he was a loser, a fallback guy for her. But Han Feng never in a million years thought that this two-faced bitch would end up killing him. He was furious. His whole body was trembling with uncontrolled rage. Realizing this, Han Feng calms himself. Now's not the time for revenge. Not yet. After all, revenge is a dish best served cold. He needed to secure supplies first. In the middle of his thoughts, Hyona called Han Feng's name numerous times, but Han Feng was lost in his own world, thinking. Hyona, pretending to be worried, asked if Han Feng was okay. Why is he spacing out? Han Feng, with a nervous smile, politely explained that Hyona was looking beautiful today, so her beauty made him space out. This compliment made Hyona blush, but right after that, a knowing smile crept on her lips, making her quite smug and also revealing who she really was. She continued her angelic act with a weird, seductive voice, offering that they go do some shopping together now that they've run into each other. But Han Feng just straight up declines and left, saying he couldn't go today. Hyona was speechless at what just happened. She couldn't believe Han Feng would be on the path of a bootlicker counterattack. How could this bootlicker reject my offer? Meanwhile, Han Feng was proud of himself. He saw through Hyona's intention to use him as her personal ATM. After a while, Han Feng finally reached his desired destination, Waldemar, the city's Walmart, and also the largest and most well-stocked supermarket in the East region. When the Ice Age hit, this place was cleaned out overnight, and nobody found out who was responsible. Han Feng had decided to stock up as much as he could before the apocalypse. With the aid of the internet, Han Feng searched for a survival guide for the ice apocalypse. He found a list of things he needed, which included food, winter clothes, medicines, and all the other necessary supplies and steps. But right now, the biggest problem was that Han Feng didn't have the money to stock up on all the supplies on the list. And although he had the ability to grow food, what good is it if he didn't have the food to grow in the first place? He was once again frustrated. Han Feng started cursing with any vile thing he could think of. But suddenly, a familiar notification sound prompted him to check his phone. And when he did, he was startled. It was a message about a personal loan. Since Han Feng's credit score was great, he was eligible for a loan. Seeing this, a great idea immediately came to mind. Han Feng began to install every app that give personal loans. He smirked, knowing that there were plenty of ways to get a loan, and he wouldn't have to pay it back after the apocalypse, as money would be nothing but a useless piece of paper. Meanwhile, on the streets, a can was kicked by someone in a not-so-gentle way. The person was no other than Hyona. She was absolutely furious with his bootlicker. Hyona was still stuck up on the fact that a loser like Han Feng ignored her. Han Feng was just one of her many simps, so how dare he denies her? A pathetic loser who didn't even have his own car. Hyona swore she would never play nice with Han Feng again. But at that moment, a car horn startled her. So when she turned her head to the side, the car also stopped beside her. As the SUV's window lowered, Hyona was surprised to see Han Feng inside. He even waved at her. Dumbfounded, Hyona couldn't believe her eyes. She questioned if the SUV belongs to Han Feng. Yeah, I just got it, Han Feng said with a smile. He then continued that his dad had been killing it in his business in the US, so he wired him some money a few hours ago. He also just dropped his dad off at the airport. Hyona was still processing all this. After realizing Han Feng was a great human wallet to have, Hyona's entire personality did a 180. She immediately got all emotional and sentimental, crying and apologizing, saying she was really sorry for asking Han Feng to go shopping with her that morning, when he was going to pick up his dad from the airport. Hyona then made a cute and sorrowful face as she wipes off her fake tears. She played the victim card, saying Han Feng was really cold towards her, that she thought maybe he was ditching her, his best friend. Silly girl. Han Feng's entire demeanor changed when he said this. He was more confident and seductive. He gently grabbed Hyona's waist, pulled her close, and while holding her chin delicately, he said, "Why would I ever ditch you? Hyona, you're the most important person in the world to me." Again, that mischievous, knowing smile crept on her lips once more, showing her true nature. Then, the Oscar-worthy performance was once more on display. Hyona pretended to be all shy, then cast her gaze on the ground and said that Han Feng was also very special to her. Hyona then proceeds to ask, why don't they go watch a movie and have dinner together at a high-end restaurant? Hyona lifts her head up and asks what Han Feng thought about her suggestion. However, to her surprise, Han Feng was already gone. Huh? Where did he go? The noise behind her made her turn back, and when she did, Han Feng was assembling all the supplies in the back of his SUV. He explained that he still had to carry all the stuff upstairs, so he can't today. He was obviously busy. Even though Hyona was furious hearing this, she politely asked, "Why did you buy so much stuff? What's inside the boxes?" Han Feng casually explains that they were nothing special, just some stuff he likes. That's all. Then, feigning excitement, Han Feng said he also got a special gift for Hyona, and once he's less busy, they will meet up. This made Hyona extremely happy, so as she turned to leave, she made mention that she was really looking forward to the gift. Hyona also said that she was heading home. Hearing this, Han Feng nonchalantly replied that she better do just that. With her back turned, Hyona reverted to her true self, pleased. She was quite satisfied with herself, thinking she'd nailed it and got a great wallet at her disposal. On the other hand, Han Feng stole a cold glance from behind him, thinking he couldn't let Hyona find out about his little stockpiling. It's his ticket to surviving the apocalypse, after all. Han Feng couldn't wait to turn Hyona's world into a living nightmare when the apocalypse hits. She and the guy that helped in killing him. Han Feng's expression turned sinister, like that of a grim reaper. He was actually starting to look forward to the apocalypse. The days rolled by and just like that, bam! July 15th, the day the apocalypse arrives. But before that there was heavy snow first. Then, the temperature eventually plummets to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Over the next month, the temperature will continue to drop gradually, reaching a new low of minus 70 degrees Celsius. By that time, the world will be encased in ice and snow, making it impossible to go outside. That's why Han Feng had to prepare before that very day. He needs to stock up on enough food supplies, but he couldn't let his neighbors suspect his sudden hoarding. So Han Feng had his packages sealed in hazardous boxes, and the sensitive supplies like medical supplies are moved by Han Feng at night when no one's around. So with those issues sorted, the next issue was electricity. After the apocalypse hits, the power grid will be extremely unstable. So Han Feng got a generator and enough fuel to keep it running for at least a year. Also, the heating system will stop when the apocalypse hit, so Han Feng modified his house for independent heating, and also reinforced his doors and windows while he was at it. He also dedicated an entire room for storing his supplies too. By the time he finished getting everything ready, it was already July 14th, and the beginning of the apocalypse was the very next day. Finally, it was time for the main event, and thus, discovering the mystery behind how his power works. Han Feng knew that to survive in the upcoming Ice Age apocalypse, relying solely on the supplies he'd accumulated won't be enough. He needed a long-term solution, and the key was to find out more about his power to manipulate plants. After all, it was his last hope. Han Feng had cooked the soybeans he grew and decided to eat them to check if they were edible. Staring nervously at his spoon full of cooked soybeans, Han Feng was hesitant, and rightfully so. He had no clue what to expect if he eats it, but Han Feng knew that if he didn't try, he would never know. And with his ability acting so random, it was difficult to figure out its triggers. So as he takes a deep breath, Han Feng took a bite, and to his surprise, it was edible. And not only that, it also tasted just like any normal soybean. In fact, it was extremely delicious that Han Feng finished half his plate before he even realized it. After the confirmation that he can now produce food, the next step Han Feng thought was to figure out how this ability of his actually worked. So far, he'd only tried it on soybeans. Han Feng opened his fridge, which was now fully stocked with all kinds of food. He decided to test if his ability also worked on other plants. Hours passed just like that, and before he even realized it, the sun had already set. Han Feng found it difficult to open his eyes, so when he eventually did, he questioned himself if he'd pass out. He was also holding a fresh vegetable in his hand. Han Feng's head was spinning, and he also felt extremely exhausted. Around him were various vegetables and black substances, like a pile of dirt, scattered around him. It seems this power takes a serious toll on his mind and body. So to replenish his lost energy, Han Feng decided to finish his plate. As he was eating, Han Feng was inwardly delighted about the progress he'd made so far. He had learned something new about his ability, so as he continues to stare at his right hand, he recollects his progress. Before Han Feng blacked out earlier, he tried using his power on a bunch of different plants. Some vegetables didn't react at all. Some grew from seeds to full-grown plants, just like the soybean seeds. And some, well, they just exploded in Han Feng's face. But the weird aspect of it was, after the explosion, they turned into a coal-like substance that was extremely light. Seeing this made Han Feng try heating it. Then, voila! He found out that they could be used as regular coal, which made Han Feng extremely pleased with himself. This meant he wouldn't have to worry about a way of staying warm forever. Afterward, he tried many more times, but the success rate was extremely low. However, Han Feng started to notice a pattern. When he remained calm and focused, there was some reaction. So he tried to remain calm and focused when activating his ability. And to his surprise, a fresh broccoli grew instantly in his hand. This was when Han Feng passed out immediately after. Back to the present, Han Feng was contemplating. He couldn't find any significant patterns at all. But he knew deep within him, like a gut feeling, that there was definitely some kind of principle behind how his ability works. Having some understanding of the activating conditions, Han Feng placed the fresh broccoli on his table and sat in the lotus position trying to meditate. He imagined himself out in nature, standing naked, making his mind and body a part of nature. As Han Feng slowly opens his eyes, he was delighted to see that it was a success. It was as he suspected. His ability was directly connected to his consciousness. Han Feng didn't feel like his energy was being drained, and the green glow was a lot calmer and brighter. Then, he decided to use it on a fresh, juicy meat. Han Feng picked out a fresh, juicy meat with his glowing green hand, expecting it to grow, but there was no reaction. He tried meditating while holding it. Again, nothing happened. Then, he remembered when he was meditating, he could sense two distinct colors, and he hadn't even tried using the red color yet. This prompted him to once again close his eyes and try to summon the red light. Several minutes passed by, but nothing happened. Then, finally, after what seems like a while, the red light was activated and started covering the whole piece of meat. Han Feng opened his eyes moments after when he smelled something odd. Immediately upon opening his eyes, he got disgusted. The meat looked spoiled to the extent that just the smell was enough to make him want to puke. He threw the meat on the floor, but after a while, curiosity got the best of him as he came back to check what the meat had really turned into. Han Feng was a little disappointed. Upon close inspection, the meat actually looked like it's been cooked or close to being rotten or something. Seeing this, Han Feng thought to himself, is this all the red light could do? Heat things up like this? No, there has to be more. The meat looked like it had gone through a disintegration process. The word disintegration sparked an idea in Han Feng's head. So he immediately grabbed some soybeans in his right hand, then activated his green light, and in his left hand, he held the meat covered in red light. Han Feng thought if his guess is correct, then the green light represented the evolution of matter, and the red light represented the opposite, which was disintegration. So what if he combined them? As soon as he did, Han Feng exclaimed in surprise. His eyes bulged out like they were about to fall off. The small, low-quality meat grew almost 5 times its size and turned into a premium-looking meat. Dumbfounded, Han Feng was confused about what just happened. He had casually merged both light, not knowing the result would be like this. Also, the soybean in his left hand was gone. Did it merge with the meat? Han Feng checked the meat up close, smelling and tasting it also. But the meat looked, felt, and smelled exactly like a real meat, and was even somehow fresher, like a premium meat. Beaming with excitement, Han Feng decided to try this one more time, but ended up ruining all the meat, which made him beat the floor over and over again in frustration. Having enough, Han Feng thought he will just have to figure it out later. He stared at his glowing hands and thought his day was really productive as he figured out a bit about his abilities. He knew that if he mastered his power, he could become the only man standing at the pinnacle of the imminent apocalyptic world. But just as he was daydreaming, another thought came to mind that froze him on the spot. Han Feng had forgot about weapons. Han Feng immediately packed all the food back into a box. But in the middle of his packing, it started to snow outside. It is here, Han Feng thought. It was finally happening. The apocalypse had started. It was really happening. After that, Han Feng, wearing warm clothes, was walking on the streets, deep in thoughts. In just a few hours, the entire streets were being covered with snow. Han Feng knew the temperature will drop to below 45 within the week. Everyone around him were enjoying the snow, not knowing how disastrous it would become later on. However, Han Feng wasn't bothered about such matter. He needed a gun. And although buying a gun was illegal, Han Feng couldn't even buy one if he tried. He didn't exactly have any connections to get one. Just then, a sharp voice pierced Han Feng's ears. The source of the voice belonged to a young man with an exaggerated fashion style, acting all high and mighty, with no actual work to do. He is always roaming the streets, aimlessly. Everyone knew him as Homeless Joe. But his real name is Li Zi, and the people around him calls him Brother Li. Li Zi lives in the same neighborhood as Han Feng. Li Zi is reputed to be in charge of big construction projects and seems to know everyone around, but the truth is, he doesn't have a proper job. Also, he always claims and acts like he's busy. The only thing he has is some connections with some big shots and even gangsters, and that's the only reason Han Feng thought of him. He was the only man Han Feng knew of who could get guns for him. So with a nervous look, Han Feng called his name, waving as he did so. But when Li Zi turned his head to take a look at Han Feng, his face was filled with annoyance, like he's been interrupted in a huge business meeting. He asked if he knew Han Feng. Han Feng explained that they met a while ago and live in the same neighborhood. Li Zi, acting bored, said he was pretty busy, so Han Feng shouldn't blame him for his bad memory. Anyway, what can I do for you? Then Han Feng immediately looked from side to side, and after confirming that there was no one around, Han Feng came close to Li Zi and whispered in his ear, asking if he's ever dealt with guns. This shocked Li Zi greatly, so he asked why Han Feng needed a gun. Han Feng remained silent for a while, feeling guilty. Seeing Han Feng's silence, Li Zi assumed Han Feng was going to do something illegal with it, so he warned him not to try any funny business. Guns were dangerous, and although he's got connections, he's not going to help Han Feng get entangled with anything dangerous. But Han Feng, on the spot, came up with an excuse. He explains it wasn't what Li Zi was thinking. He only wants it for self-defense. A flashback shows a day not long ago. While Han Feng was riding his bike to work, he ran into an old man who was spitting everywhere, so he spat right on Han Feng's face. Han Feng confronted the old man, insisting he apologize, but the man spat on his face again. This made Han Feng furious, so he gave him a good beating. As the old man left, he said he'd get back at Han Feng. And sure enough, the very next day, the same old man came up with his gang and fucked Han Feng up. Still, to this day, whenever they see Han Feng, a good beating soon followed. Han Feng's life became a living hell. He'd never been so humiliated, so that's why he needed the gun for self-defense. Seeing Li Zi becoming all worked up and angry surprised Han Feng. He didn't expect this cliché story to work, let alone to this degree. Li Zi grabbed Han Feng by the shoulder and told him to say no more. From this moment onwards, his big brother Li got him covered. Li Zi proceeds to tell Han Feng that he would make sure to fulfill his request. Now, Han Feng needs to follow him to the bus stop to hop on one. Li Zi told Han Feng his Mercedes was in service, so they need to make do with the bus service. Han Feng expected this, so he wasn't surprised. Although Li Zi was a big talker and liked to bluff, he's not a bad person. So Han Feng took out the keys to his SUV, telling Li Zi not to worry about it. He had a car. Seeing this, Li Zi couldn't help but be surprised. Soon after, the two were in the SUV, and as Han Feng was driving, Li Zi was really impressed. He didn't think Han Feng was a rich kid. Then, Li Zi took out his phone and started taking and posting pictures on social media, boasting about driving his new car. Finally, after a while, they reached their destination. And from the looks of it, people on the streets were already feeling the cold. They made some fire to warm themselves. As soon as Li Zi got out of the SUV, everyone around came close to him. They were surprised and shocked, asking what business he had doing there. Also, what's with this SUV? How much was it? Hearing this, Li Zi casually said it wasn't something much, just 700 grand, give or take. Meanwhile, Han Feng was speechless hearing this. He thought that it was bold for Li Zi to tell everyone that he owned a car right in front of the actual owner. As they went inside, the boss, who was leisurely sitting on his sofa, asked Li Zi what he was doing at his place at a time like this. Li Zi was a little nervous, so first he offered Boss Lu some cigarette, then introduced Han Feng, saying he wanted to buy a gun. Hearing this, the Boss Lu took a quick look at Han Feng, which sent chills down his spine. That's it. A lousy gun. I thought you were bringing me something interesting, Boss Lu said with a smirk. He then tells one of his men, Xiangzi, to give Han Feng a handgun. The price was 6 grand. Hearing Boss Lu made mention of a handgun, Han Feng, still nervous, asked if he could get something a little longer. You know, like the one with a scope. Hearing this, Boss Lu took a moment to stare at Han Feng, who began to sweat bullets. Then, a loud roar echoed the entire room. Kid, are you asking for a freaking sniper rifle? Do you think this is a fucking shopping mall where you can order anything you want? Just this freaking short one, you say? Take it or leave it. Li Zi, seeing the boss so worked up, immediately came to his side and started telling Han Feng's sad and tragic story. It was something about Han Feng having an ex-wife with 3 kids that wasn't his. After hearing the entire story a while later on, Boss Lu immediately got furious, slamming his hand on his desk. He was furious about how a wife could be so disgusting, having 3 kids that belongs to another man other than your husband. At this point, Han Feng started to see the similarity. Suddenly, Boss Lu had a change of mind. He told Han Feng that he would make sure to get him a sniper rifle. Han Feng, on the other hand, couldn't believe how such obvious fake stories convinced both of them. Hearing this, Han Feng thanked Boss Lu. Boss Lu told Xiangzi to see if he could get a semi-automatic rifle for Han Feng. He also gave Han Feng a loaded handgun as a gift. Seeing this act of kindness surprised Han Feng greatly. He was a little taken aback of how generous Boss Lu was. Still nervous, Han Feng made mention that a friend of his was working for the government, and he told him that due to the abnormal weather, there was going to be a shortage of food and other supplies, so it was better to stockpile when it was available in advance. Boss Lu was skeptical about it, but seeing the serious look on Han Feng's face made him consider it. He told Han Feng he got it. He then tells them to get lost. Just seeing Li Zi's face annoyed him greatly. Outside, Han Feng and Li Zi were walking. Li Zi started his bragging session, saying he handled the situation beautifully. If it wasn't for him, Han Feng would have been done for. Also, Boss Lu was in a good mood, so he could have even asked him for a cannon and he'd probably had said yes. Han Feng thanked Li Zi, and as a token of his gratitude, he promised to grab Li Zi some cigarettes on the way. Hearing this, Li Zi, being his usual self, told Han Feng not to be silly. He didn't want cigarettes, he just liked helping people, but if Han Feng really insisted, then he wanted Huazi, as other brands made him choke. Although the price of the cigar was high, once he got paid for his project, he would definitely pay Han Feng back and even take him to a sauna. Han Feng immediately tuned him out when he started his usual bragging session. Han Feng was lost in his own thoughts. Now supplies and weapons were all in check. He was all set for the early stages of the apocalypse, at least. All that's left was to study his ability. Han Feng knew that if he could fully master his ability, his chances of survival would skyrocket. But at that moment, Han Feng's foot slipped on the icy snow. Then, he did a mid-backward flip as his shoe was sent flying. Han Feng fell on the floor, groaning in pain, holding his foot. He felt like his foot was broken. So, trembling in pain, Han Feng gave the keys of his SUV to Li Zi, asking him to take him to the hospital. Li Zi replied nervously that he didn't have a driving license and can't drive without one. So with great effort, Li Zi lifts Han Feng onto his shoulder. He looked like he had eaten a bowl of raw pepper and would pass out any moment. And Han Feng, well, he was speechless with his current situation. He told Li Zi to just get a taxi. Meanwhile, the snowstorm was getting heavier and worsening by the minute. It was seriously freezing outside. The entire hospital's outer walls were frozen. Inside, a nurse on night shift was observing the worsening weather with concern. Just then, the phone rang and the nurse stood up to pick up. And from the looks of it, her figure was in direct competition with Li Hiona's. She was immediately called to the hall as there was an emergency. On the other hand, Han Feng had gotten an X-ray scan, and it was as he feared. His leg was indeed broken. Upon close examination, the physician diagnosed that, according to his scan, there was a stable fracture on Han Feng's right tibia. The physician then continued that he was going to set it so Han Feng shouldn't worry. However, Han Feng needed to stay for an hour for observation. And after that, he can grab his meds and leave. At the waiting hall, Han Feng, staring at the X-ray scan, couldn't wrap his head around the timing of his accident. He thought of all times that the accident could have occurred. It had to happen just before the apocalypse hit. Just then, Li Zi called him saying he had to go. He's got a few deals he had to close. But if Han Feng needs anything, he's a phone call away. Hearing this, Han Feng just gave him a thumbs up, telling him to take care. Sighing heavily, Han Feng then took a good look around and noticed that the hospital was quite busy tonight. The city hospital was overflowing with patients, victims of accidents caused by the sudden blizzard and plummeting temperatures. The emergency beds were lined up in the hallway, a grim testament to the worsening conditions outside. Looking from left to right and right to left, Han Feng wondered how long it would be till he gets his meds. But at that moment, a pair of bouncing melons immediately caught his attention. Unable to look away, Han Feng continued to stare at them like a creep. These extraordinary pair of beauties belonged to Nurse Jean, a head nurse of the hospital, who happens to be checking a patient who had several severe wounds. After checking that his vitals were stable, she told the attending nurse to administer another dose of glucose in 10 minutes. Also, if the patient's heart drops below 80, administer an epinephrine. On the other end of the hall, Han Feng was observing the head nurse with an evident blush. He thought she was amazing. To become a head nurse at such a young age was indeed an amazing feat, and not only that, Nurse Zhan was incredibly skilled, kind to every patient, and doesn't seem to have a chip on her shoulder. But the most important and obvious thing to notice about her was that she was drop-dead gorgeous. A pretty face and a well-defined good body. It seems she got everything going for her. However, she was also way too clueless about her charm and surroundings. Her behavior exposes herself often, and the disturbing part was that she wasn't self-conscious about it. Like at all. And Han Feng noticed that about her right away. But he seems not to be the only one. An old man sitting beside him called her over, claiming it was an emergency. Hearing this, Nurse Zhan was polite and rushed over. She apologized to the old man for any inconvenience. They were a bit short-staffed at the moment. Anyway, can I come a bit later to help you? She asked. But the old man replied that his back suddenly started hurting. And it's been getting worse lately. Unbeknownst to Nurse Zhan, the old man took out his phone and started recording her from underneath her uniform. He asked Nurse Zhan if she could take a look and find out what's causing it. But the clueless head nurse apologized again, saying they'll need to get an X-ray to be sure of the cause. Just like all perverts, the old geezer insisted the nurse took a look anyway. He reached out his hand and forcefully grabbed the waist of the head nurse. Nurse Zhan was ticklish and uncomfortable with the old man's behavior, so she told the old pervert to wait for the resident physician to examine him. Hearing this boldened the old geezer's actions, so he slowly lowered his hands down Nurse Zhan's ass, intending to give it a squeeze. But at that precise moment, something flew towards his way. Then, bam! Seconds later, the old pervert was seen on the floor, groaning in pain. Seeing this, Nurse Zhan asked the old geezer if he was okay, but Han Feng appeared at the scene, apologizing for hitting the old man with his crutches. He claimed it was his first time using them. Han Feng then bends down and took the old man's phone, claiming he was checking whether it was broken. This immediately alarmed the old man, who told Han Feng not to touch his phone. But it was too late. Han Feng was already checking the content displayed on the screen. His expression became dark as his entire presence was dim with an ominous aura. He didn't even notice that the bandages on his leg had loosened and fallen off. Everything was just as he suspected. This fucking old geezer got some nerve, filming up a nurse's skirt and even molesting her in public. Han Feng showed the old man the video and asked for a good reason why he shouldn't call security, and have them escort the old man to a police station where they love perverts like him. Han Feng told the old man to scram, and he shouldn't dream of getting his phone back. Also, the next time Han Feng sees his creepy face, everything he did was going straight to the internet. Hearing all this, the old man could do nothing but grit his teeth in frustration. Then, he quickly made a mad dash for the exit, running as fast as his old legs could carry him. Seeing this made Nurse Zhan shout for the old man to wait. She was confused about the old man's sudden display of energy. Didn't he say his back hurt? How can he ran off so quickly? Hearing this, Han Feng was utterly speechless, his mouth wide open highlighting what he was witnessing. He couldn't believe it. There couldn't be people this naive in the world, could it? Han Feng showed Nurse Zhan the evidence for the old man's sudden actions. Nurse Zhan was genuinely shocked. She wondered how she didn't notice anything. Han Feng gave Nurse Zhan the phone, telling her to decide whether she wants to wipe the evidence or call the cops, whichever makes her feel better. However, she should be more careful from this day forth so perverts like the old geezer don't take advantage of her. Hearing this, Nurse Zhan gave her usual radiant smile, thanking Han Feng. Also, she'd been meaning to ask Han Feng about the issue with his leg. Isn't your ankle injured? The way the question was asked sent a chill down Han Feng's spine. And as he remembered he had a broken leg, all the pain that was masked by his urge to protect Nurse Zhan came flooding in like a broken pipe. Seconds after, Han Feng's screams could be heard across the hall. Nurse Zhan had expertly rebandaged Han Feng's leg. And still with that radiant smile, she asked Han Feng if it still hurt. No, not at all. Han Feng thanked her. So with vigor, Nurse Zhan assured Han Feng that she'll never let such bad people get away with such behavior anymore. Hearing this, Han Feng just tells her to be more aware of her surroundings and she will be fine. And to put it to a check, he lifted his injured leg to have a feel of those divine melons. And to his horror, Nurse Zhan was not aware at all. Not even a little bit. I mean, didn't she just say she will be more attuned to her surroundings? But at that moment, another nurse called for her. Nurse Zhan was needed elsewhere, so as she got up to leave, she reminded Han Feng not to forget to come back in a week's time to get his ankle checked. A week's time, huh? I guess I won't be seeing her again. Han Feng thought of this as he got up, grabbed his crutches and left the hospital scene. The very next day, the snowstorm got even worse than before. It was becoming more and more difficult to even take a walk outside. Every channel was interrupted with an urgent news. It was announced that all regions in the country was experiencing the same icy weather, and other countries worldwide was no different. However, experts and specialists from 46 other countries have all gathered at UN to discuss the weather's anomaly. But one thing was certain, according to their experts, the snowstorm won't last long. So everyone should follow the guidelines issued by the government and refrain from hoarding supplies and spreading rumors. However, Han Feng, enjoying a glass of premium wine in his apartment while listening to the government's bullshit, thought it was typical for them to do so to keep their citizens from panicking. If Han Feng hadn't been reborn, he would have also believed in the pile of shit they were spouting. Anyway, he was prepared this time around. His supplies were fully stocked, and his house was reinforced to withstand almost any form of break-in and has its own heating system. He needn't worry about his survival for a long while. At that moment, a ding sound brought Han Feng from his reverie, and as he checked his chat group for the housing complex residents of his building, almost everyone was delighted with the current situation the world was facing. They were glad to be lazing around without going to school or work. However, one message got Han Feng's attention. Someone with the chat name of Mysterious Person had announced that the Ice Age apocalypse was about to begin. Han Feng, with a surprised look, questioned himself how the person knew about the apocalypse. It looks like Han Feng needs to be mindful of this mysterious person. Reading through the comments, the property management team was under constant pressure from the tenants to go shovel the snow outside. And although it was minus 20 degrees outside, the tenants didn't care and wanted to take their cars to the supermarket to get supplies. Inside a 3D version of the group chat, there was uproar. Everyone was arguing about procuring supplies since they didn't know when the weather will revert to normal. The tenants are protesting for the property managers to show themselves. They demanded an explanation as to why they haven't shoveled the snow outside the apartment complex. Seeing the angry mob, the management team apologized, saying there wasn't anything they could really do in this snowstorm. However, the tenants still didn't care. What's the point of paying them if they couldn't handle such a small matter? If the property managers couldn't help them, then they demanded a refund on the fees that they had been paying them until now. Among the crowd was Han Feng, who scoffs at the absurdity of the situation. He knows that this crisis was beyond the control of humans, so the current argument was completely meaningless. One of the residents steps up and tries to calm everyone down. He states that the snowstorm was so heavy that even if the property managers try to clear the snow by themselves, it will just be covered again in a few hours. He then suggests that they all work together to clear the snow. If they had done that instead of fighting, they would have been able to go out long ago. After all, the property managers were humans just like everyone present. There was really nothing they could do in this kind of disaster. He then questions if everyone was just taking their frustration out on them. Hearing this, some of the residents question why they were the ones being lectured. Why was the person speaking on behalf of the property management team? Was he the owner? They have been paying the property managers for such situations like this, so why should they waste their energy helping? However, Glasses Man replied that he wasn't speaking on behalf of the property management team. He was speaking objectively and realistically. Besides, driving a car to the supermarket was impossible. And even if they do manage to clear the roads in their neighborhood, who could guarantee that the roads outside were also cleared? Hearing this, the angry tenants asked Glasses Man what they should do then. Upon hearing this, Glasses Man was delighted. So he proceeds to suggest that they walk to the supermarket. If everyone present agrees, he will personally go outside with the property management team to clear a footpath for everyone. It was in that moment that Han Feng seemed to have some recollection of Glasses Man. His name was Zhang, and if Han Feng remembers correctly, in his previous life, Zhang was a very lively person, and that's it. That's all he remembers. Seriously. But at that moment, another user cuts in, saying the matter at hand wasn't complicated, so why was everyone making it such a drag? Those who want to go outside should just clear the roads, and the ones who aren't should just shut their bitch ass up. Fighting for half a day just to clear some snow was very annoying. His disinterested attitude on the matter was evident to see, so he immediately logged out as quickly as he logged in, leaving everyone speechless. As brief silence ensues, another user commented that he will also head outside to help. He wants the roads cleared quickly because he needed to help his good brother down the streets to discuss business worth millions. Han Feng immediately knew who the person was. After all, there was only one person who spoke in such a manner. Li Zi. Following Li Zi's volunteering service was a few others who also agreed to go shovel snow outside. Just as the discussion was nearing its end, Another user stole the spotlight. Raising her hand as well, she also wanted to shovel snow outside, but added she might be physically weak compared to everyone. Also, she had had a flu for the past 2 days, but brother Zhang had set an example, so she was willing to help however she can. Han Feng, knowing firsthand the cunningness of the user, wondered if she really intended on going in the first place. Hearing that Hyona was willing to go do shoveling, all of her simps hopped in as well, saying that they are willing to cooperate. They were so many abled men, so how can they let their goddess shovel snow? She should just stay home, rest well, and recuperate. Hyona thanked everyone for their concern. Since they were insisting, she will have to trouble everyone and do what she had been told. Han Feng logged off, irritated by the bitch's acting. He can't help but admit that Hyona is really good at catching people's heart. Even he was a victim of her act once upon a time. And speaking of the devil, Li Hyona messaged Han Feng at that moment, asking what he has been up to lately. She also made mention that Han Feng promised her that he would contact her, so she's been waiting. Hyona then asks Han Feng a favor to go get her some supplies, then proceeds to send him a seductive selfie, wearing too little, despite the cold. Han Feng noticed this. After all, it was Hyona's usual tactics to get her bootlickers to do her bidding. Han Feng contemplated on how to reply her, and from the looks of it, Han Feng's reply made Hyona's poor phone face her wrath. She was really pissed with Han Feng's sudden path of a bootlicker counterattacks. On the 3rd day since it started snowing, the temperature was -20 degrees. In the early stages of the apocalypse, everyone still had the central heating system running, and the internet was still up and running, so everyone was living their lives as usual. Meanwhile, Han Feng was bored. Just on the 2nd day, and he was already bored to death. He had been scrolling through numerous videos for 3 days. It seems Han Feng's biggest problem during this apocalypse was to learn how to endure loneliness. And his broken leg wasn't helping either. It needed at least a month to make a full recovery. Not having better things to do, he decided to continue scrolling through random videos where he came across some news about the power of self-recovery. In the video, the doctors sewed up the wounds of a patient who jumped off from the 15th floor of a building. After sewing, they discovered that the patient's damaged internal organs and bones had started to regenerate. This miraculous news gave Han Feng an idea. He remembered that he had an ability that promotes growth. "Why didn't I think of this earlier?" he said. Han Feng activated his green light, reached out and placed his hand on his broken leg, wondering if there will be some kind of effect. He poured everything he got into this little experiment. And as the green light dissipates, Han Feng waited for any signs of effect. But nothing, absolutely nothing occurred. Seeing this, he laid comfortably on his sofa feeling a bit disappointed. He thought that the green light would be able to help him recover his injury faster. Suddenly, drowsiness hits him hard, and after a single yawn, Han Feng was out cold. In his sea of consciousness, he dreams. He was wearing some tribal outfit while riding a mountain goat. And from what it seems, he was also traveling with these herd of goats.